Hi everybody, this is a little tutorial going over some basic presentation skills. Presentations are something that you have to do in every course. Sometimes it's a small assignment, sometimes it's something huge. And it's something that a lot of us have nerves surrounding. So this is a little overview of some great easy things you can do to make your presentation clear and stand out and successful. So these are the three things we're going to go through. What you should do, some common mistakes or things to avoid, and then some great resources out there that you can use to help you. Let's talk first about the qualities of a good presentation. Organization. Right from the beginning, tell us what you want to prove. Tell us something like your hypothesis. What is the big question that you are setting out to answer? Whether it's an argument for an English class or an aspect of biology that you're there to teach us about, or a French country that you are there to introduce us to. Tell us what to expect, tell us your purpose, and make your organization really clear. Your slides can help you with that, having things like really clear numbers, subtitles, headings, and also make sure that you are leading us through your points. This is what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to go here. As listeners, we need those really clear, obvious checkpoints. And when you hear really great speakers, often they are telling us exactly how to follow along with them. So they will do things like, here are my 3 key ideas. Number 1, number 2, number 3. You're going to be a lot more direct and obvious in something like a speech or a presentation than you would in a piece of writing. Evidence. Whether it's a response to a story, a research project, or just your opinion, the more you back it up, the better. So find that evidence with something like a quotation from a course text. Do some extra research. Use some personal stories or personal experiences to back things up. But again, if you want to convince us that your hypothesis, your argument is the one that we should all back, you need to give us a reason why. Here are some different types of evidence. You could have direct quotations from your text or your research. You could have interesting or inspiring quotations that set up interesting ideas. You could have something from a famous author or a singer that everybody can relate to, or a philosopher, or just a big statement about life. Setting up your ideas or including an outside phrase can often help to frame your ideas and get us interested in it. You can also use things like graphs, maps, or primary source images. A primary source image is something like in a history class, let's say you're doing a presentation on the 1920s, you can find an image from the 1920s. That is a kind of evidence too. Just remember that any evidence you use, you should explain it. So don't just slap it on the slide for us and say, oh, check that box off, I've got an image from the 1920s. Tell us what's happening in the image. Tell us why you put it there and what it should make us think about. You can also use things like YouTube videos or songs. But again, always tell us why they're there. What do you want us to think about? What do you want us to get out of it? Visuals. Obviously, with a presentation, the speaking and the organization of your thoughts out loud is going to be really important, but so are the visuals that you use to back it up. Those visuals can help engage us. They can be part of the evidence. They can help us focus in on what you're saying and follow your ideas. They should be there to enhance the presentation, and they should be there to make us think about your ideas from your perspective. So you can do things like use images of your characters or the event or topic you're addressing. Don't overuse your slides, so don't throw so many images on there that we don't know what to focus on first. Make sure that you source any images that aren't yours. And another really great tip is to try out some templates or visual presentation resources that are out there. There's so many free resources out there for students, and I'm going to go through some of those at the end of this little tutorial. Also think about giving us visual cues and markers, things like headings, subheadings, transitions, arrows, help us to connect your thinking. Remember, we're not in your head, so you need to show us exactly where to go. Providing your audience with a visual outline at the beginning is also really helpful, and then doing things like using a number or a letter to show us where we are in that outline as you take us through also helps us to follow your train of thought. Keep your text to a minimum on the actual slides and try instead to use things like visual communication. So here's some different examples of some ways you can use visuals. Use a really big image. Get us to jump into the setting of your story, or to really focus in on a person from history, or to really understand what the inner workings of a cell might look like. So a complex idea can be conveyed with just a single image, making it possible for us to then absorb a lot of ideas and data as you talk and explain it. Charts are a really great way to explain your ideas, not only to show us what those ideas are and what the data is, but to show us how it connects and how we should piece this information together so we know how you're proving your argument. You can use things like tables or graphs or graphic organizers to show how those ideas connect. And there's a lot of resources built into tools like Google Slides. So for example, I'm going to exit out of presentation mode and just show you how you can do something like insert a graph or a chart. So to make this little piece of information, let's say I did some research and I wanted to highlight what teachers and students say give them the most impressive or effective presentation components. So what I did to create this very simply is, I'll just go to a new slide here, and I can just go into insert and I can choose a chart. So I can choose bar graphs, columns, line. I chose a pie chart. And then what it does is it just inserts kind of a blank chart for you. Then you can go to edit it in Google Sheets. You can link it to other information, but you can link it into a Google Sheet. So if I go back into here, just clicking on it will open up a Google Sheet for me. And then I just went in and changed the names of the categories, changed some of the data, and also went in and changed the title. So you do have to play around with it a little bit, but it's a really easy and interesting way to present your information a little bit differently. Also remember to involve your audience. Often when people are doing presentations, they're doing them back to back with a lot of other student presentations. So you want to make yours stand out and you want to help us focus. We all know from being students that we tune out very quickly when someone's talking, especially if they are just talking about ideas that don't seem to have relevance to us, or they're not making us accountable or involved. So try out some simple, easy things. You could do something like a little Kahoot, or there's a great website called Mentimeter they'll introduce you to, or a Jamboard. You could do a simple ask for opinions, have students type in a chat, or do an in-person classroom poll. You can also do a poll on Zoom itself. There's a lot of different tech tools that integrate really easily into Zoom or Google Meet. But the more you can involve your audience, even by something simple as asking a really great question or asking an opinion, all of a sudden your audience is going to pay a lot more attention to you. Don't forget, anything you use, any kind of outside source, whether it's something like a Kahoot or something like an image, always make sure you cite your sources and any resources that you used. Depending on your teacher, there's going to be different rules as to how and where you source them. But remember, anything you do not create, you need to source, because otherwise claiming it without that source is a form of plagiarism. Let's talk about some common errors or mistakes now in presentations. Too much text. So a lot of times we want to show off how many great ideas we have and we want to really explain everything. And although that's what we would do in writing, that's not what we do in a presentation. Focus in on the most important ideas, make some subheadings, make some point form comments, and then anything that you want to write up in more detail, you can do in something like the speaker's notes. So you can type in here and add notes to yourself that you can have access to as you present. Remember that as you're presenting, people will either read what's on the slide or listen to you. Generally, it's really hard for them to do both. So now my computer's frozen a little bit. I'm just going to exit out. Don't read off your slides or a prepared script too much. Don't rely on that because, again, it's a way of disengaging from the audience. And as soon as you disengage from us, we disengage from you. So again, try to practice out your presentation so that you don't have to read everything word for word. And don't rely on something like a pre-prepared script. Point form notes and explanation is much more effective. Another really common issue to avoid is not having evidence. Always remember to show your work. So in math, when you're given a question, you have to provide not just the answer, but also how you got to that answer. And that's what we call showing your work. So showing your work in something like an English presentation might mean you use a quotation from a story and then explain what you think about it. Showing your work in an HPE presentation might be including some data or maybe a survey you've done about people's workout routines and then explaining what that data says and why it's important. Showing your work in a history presentation might include giving us some of those primary source images and showing how the people in those images are behaving according to their time or their products of what's going on in the world at that time. Another really common error is voice tone and volume. So make sure that you're projecting. Make sure that if you are nervous, you have some strategies around how to control those nerves so that we can still hear you. You might want to do something like in your speaker's notes, add in stop here, pause here, make eye contact here. Because a lot of us, when nerves take over, we read really quickly or we read without meaning. So things like putting a pause in after you make a really important point will help you remember to slow down and focus on what you're saying. Another really common error is not having a clear argument. You've just answered the set of questions that your teacher gave you, but you haven't really put it together and you're not really telling us why we should care about it. I always tell my students in any writing you do or any piece of work that you do, always be able to answer the question, so what? Why do I care? If as an audience member, I don't know why I should care about your presentation, that means you probably aren't clearly communicating your argument. Here's some really great resources that you can use to create visuals or to create involvement. I'm not going to go and open all of them, but these are all clickable links, which I will show you how to get to at the end of this little video. Canva, you can create all kinds of visuals, everything from an Instagram post to a really detailed infographic. Easily is very similar. I find Canva a little bit easier to use. Easily has a little bit more availability of things like graphing if you want to show a lot of data. Slide Carnival is a super cool, easy site to use. In fact, this slide deck was taken from Slide Carnival, and there's all different kinds of free templates just to make your presentation look a little bit different. And they also have all kinds of free graphics that you can use so that you don't have to illegally use images from the internet. These are all what we call open source, so available to use. Kahoot is an interactive game. Mentimeter is very similar to Kahoot, but a little bit shorter. I think it's ideal for presentations. You can do things like have the people watching your presentation do an on-the-spot word wall or an on-the-spot poll. And then Zoom, if you're presenting on Zoom, has a poll feature already built into it. You will have to make sure that you have host access, but there's a little link on how to do something like a Zoom poll and get some instant feedback. Remember, if you're doing a presentation through Zoom or Google Meet, you can always use the chat function as well and just try to involve students in a really easy way. Like those students who spend most of their time working out outdoors, type a 1 in the chat. Those students who prefer to work out in a gym or at home, type a 2. Make it simple and get people involved. Don't forget to check your work. So proofreading obviously is really important. Actually practice your presentation out loud so that anything that you've written, if you have maybe a sentence that's overly wordy and you stumble across it as you're trying to read it out loud, make it simpler. Pre-read so that you know when you get to that presentation, everything you have there is going to be easy for you to use. Read your assignment and your rubric. So many times students do these amazing presentations, but they're missing a really key component, like not having a bibliography or a works cited list, or not using the right amount of evidence, or not answering the question in the way that the teacher asks you to. So demonstrating your knowledge is a really important skill, but knowing what the expectations are is also something that you have to get really practiced at as a student. And every teacher, unfortunately, does have different expectations. So you want to make sure that you are giving yourself the best chance possible by following what it is that your teacher is asking you for. Those are the basics of what to do for a great presentation. I will post a link to these slides with the video itself so that you can access the links involved in them. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to play with some of the Google Slides features, you can check out the video on the YouTube channel, which features some really cool Google Slides hacks. Hopefully this has been useful. Good luck on your presentations and happy presenting.